And we're live!
Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. I'm sure I've probably spoken about the light and dark in a painting and how difficult it is actually to see, because a lot of the time what you're looking at is quite flat, the light's quite flat, and you're not able to see those really darks and the light. So as an artist, this is where you can exaggerate this a little bit. So I often give people an exercise of just looking at the light and just painting the light and ignoring the dark. And this can be done in lots of different ways on black paper with a white pencil. But what I like to do is I like to, use materials we don't often use together. So what I'm doing is I'm using a black watercolour ground. So Daniel Smith watercolour ground, and this is black. So you don't usually associate a black surface with watercolour because most watercolours are transparent and you wouldn't get a good colour from them. But I'm using the white. Again, another colour in the watercolour range, which we don't use that often, maybe at the end for a few highlights, because a lot of the watercolour practice is retaining the whiteness of the paper. So watercolour on a black ground and using the white. So I've sketched out this ballerina and I've taken two images, one in colour, one in black and white. To be honest, I don't think they're going to help me overly because there's no strong light. I'm just going to have to think about that myself. So I've used a white pastel to get the outline down because I know this will dissolve and will come off if I want it to. So all I'm going to do is keep it simple and look for the light. Now using the white paint on this surface, I find it a little bit, it's different to painting on paper because it stays wetter for longer. The watercolour stays wetter for longer and the absorbency rates are slightly different. You find you can get some different tones. So you'll see how many different tones I can get from just this one colour. So at the moment, I'm just getting a wet wash of the watercolour. Now I want it stronger than you normally would use with watercolour because it tends to absorb into the surface. So this is an old canvas that I'd already done some marks on, and I'm not wasting it. So I'm just going to start. This will end up as a mid-tone. It looks a bit lighter at the moment. I'm going to wet my brush, but it does tend to end up as a slightly more muted tone. All I'm doing is just adding water, and then at the end we'll take a break, and then at the end I will just really add a few more highlights. But you can see here, you'll actually see there's a lot of areas I will leave out, and I sometimes find painting the areas you leave out are just as effective as the areas you leave in. So all I'm doing is I'm just following the top edge. And so now with a wet brush, I'm going to just move in, and you can see how, like a watercolour, this will move and soften. So it looks quite strong now, and I do know it will fade and soften. So I'm just going to be aware of that. And like I say, I can bring in the real stronger highlights towards the end. What I do find I do sometimes is I overwork. I put too much white in. But again, that's not a problem. I can solve that and I can deal with that. I'll show you that later if I have put too many highlights in. So I'll work on this side because this is the side I've decided I want some lights. So what I'm doing is I'm just showing how you can do something simple, but it can be very effective. Those times when you've got that artist block, you think, well, what can I do? Try something different. Try something new. Try something challenging. We're not expected to create a perfect piece every time, which I know a lot of people do feel they have to. So here you go. I'm just keeping that strong, but I know it will dilute. So as you can see here, as this started to dry, it is getting a little bit lighter, but that's given me a mid-tone, which means I can now just add a few highlights. Right. What I want to do is really be very careful about how much work I do at this end on this side, because you'll see when I put a background wash in how that will push that forward. So just working on her tutu, and like I've said, you can't see these lights and darks on the photograph. This is where an artist eye is helpful, is working. Or you do it, you don't think it works, next time you do it again, you do it again, you do it again, and each time you tweak and you work and you think about what did work and what didn't work. Okay, so I'm going to continue on this side. Now, her shoes are very satiny, so I want to make sure you can see that they have a really nice sheen. And again, the dancer's got a black top, black leggings, but people can't see the original image you're working from. This is the great thing about, you know, creating a picture. Unless it's a really familiar image, they can't see what you're working from. This is where you can have a lot of fun and you can change things and make things work for you. So I'm not worrying too much about detail. All I'm doing is just getting the suggestion. It's more of a suggestion, and the shape of the figure. So lost a little bit of white here because I can feel it's absorbing into the surface. But this is no problem because it's easy enough just to add a few more, a little bit more white, a little stronger. And you don't have to put a lot on. And you'll see I've left areas here. I don't need to work on those. What I can do is I can erase them with the eraser, which is why I used a pastel pencil to put them on. I've lost a foot here, so I'm just going to have to think about. Okay. So I love working this way. I find it really relaxing, but you've also got to think about it. You know, am I adding too much and too little? And the more you do it, the more you realise how little you need to do and how much you can leave out. So I'm grateful for figure drawing or portraits where you can just get the indication of the face and the features. So carry on down here. Again, I want the shoes to be the strongest white. Same with the tutu. And again, it's absorbing. So here, I just feel that the leg is not quite attached to the body. So that's something you need to watch out for when you're painting. Just have another quick look round and just make sure that everything is attached. Because it's a small thing like that that can make your painting look that little bit odd. Just dabbing it on. Okay, so now just work on this side. So the light will be hitting the top of the shoulder here. Again, keep this brush wet. It's a synthetic brush, so it does need to be being reloaded with water. But it keeps a lovely point. Here looks a bit odd. So I just want to, before we have a break, just make sure. So on the hair, it felt a bit too liney, so all you can do is just bring it down, alter and change. This is a lot of the reason why I swap and change around a painting. Instead of going all the way down that way, I will jump to different areas. Just because once you've left an area, what you're doing is you're letting the paint settle, letting it dry, and then you can review. You can go back to it rather than continually working on it and then maybe overworking. Okay, so I'm not doing anything on the face at the moment. I think that looks okay for now. So why don't we have a short break, and then I'll come back and I'll do the background, and then that will help me see which bits I need to add a little bit more light on. It will give me a chance to get this to dry. Okay?
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA, Society for All Artists, is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing of being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I can shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
And we're back.
Welcome back. So I've just heard we've got a question from Chrissy, and she asks, what's my favourite medium? And that's actually quite a difficult thing to answer because I'm in a really lucky position. I get to test and try so many different mediums. What I find is often the subject will lend itself to a certain medium. So I'll look at the subject, or I know which medium I have to try or use, and I'll choose a subject that fits into it. My favourites, I can tell you, I love this white on black. I like it for drawing, and I like using a pencil. It's a lot of fun. I like liquid pencil. Liquid pencil is one of my favourites, which is a graphite in a liquid form, and you can use water to dilute, and you create tones, and you can create detail. And my latest one is called a dots pen, which is an electric pen which creates pointillism. But often I find it's the subject, you'll look at the subject and think, that will look good in watercolour, will look good in acrylic. So, you know, if you often work in watercolour, you know, why not just try acrylic? We'll have to learn how to use it, but you'll find some surprising effects. And to be honest, just try what you've got. A biro and a kitchen roll, you can do some great works just using those. So sometimes keeping it simple is my tips. So with this, I want to continue and build up a little bit more strength because it's had chance to dry, so you can see more of a mid-tone now. I want to add some more highlights, and I want to add a bit of a background. The reason I'm adding a background is because you can see the areas I've left off, the areas I've not painted. By adding a background, these will be pushed forward. I'm changed brushes. This time I'm using a Kolinsky sable. The reason is because it holds a lot more water than the synthetic. I like using a synthetic brush, it keeps the point, and I will use it more often, but sometimes I do find that using a different brush or a brush that's designed to hold plenty of water helps make my work go easier. So this is a Klinsky. It holds plenty of water, which is great when I'm doing a water-based background like this. So just going around the dancer. It's really easy to see. You can see a little easier than using it on watercolour paper because the wetness is staying on the surface. So again, this now I want to be a little bit more careful around the face. So I'm just, to get a point onto your brush, you need to keep turning your brush when you're using it, and then you can get a fine point. And especially with these natural hair brushes, they hold plenty of water and you just need to keep turning to regain its point. Or if it has got a bit fluffy, just make sure it's cleaned well to get all the pigments out of your ferrule. But also you can add some boiling water maybe to the hair here. You know, with your hair, your natural hair, it gets a bit kinky and a bit fuzzy. Well, same with this natural hair. So boiling water up to the hair, not any further. It will often bring the hairs back and straighten them. You know, so if it's travelled badly and it's got a little bent, you can just easily bring that back. So look after your brushes is my main tip. But there are things you can do to help them, to revive them. So plenty of water on the background. Remember, oops, that blobbed in there. But what I do find about this Daniel Smith watercolour ground is actually the watercolours adhere very well to it. Blending is it's not as easy as on paper, it's not as soft. You can see here I've dropped water into the white and it's not bled everywhere, it's gripped to the surface, which is really nice for, you know, archival properties. What I would do is I probably will add a layer of fixative, but again, adding fixative on this surface, I've got no fear of the watercolour moving because it has stuck very well. Just make sure this is very wet. Now I'm just going to add the white in the background, and you can see here how it's going to bring out the shape. All those areas I left, I can now just bring them out with white. It's actually a little difficult to see under the lights because it's shining all over the place, but I'm going to... You find artists tend to tip and tend to jiggle about. It's just so you can see, you know, how wet your paper is or where your paint's gone. This board has been stuck down, so I can't tip it and move it like I normally would.
Sorry.
It's so I don't move it out of camera shot and wiggle it around, so Gary knows where he can focus on if he sticks things down. Not always easy for me, but it works for him. Okay, so you can see now how the white has now brought out the darker areas. I don't want to overly work this side, but I want to put a bit like a mist around the dancer. Because I just want to bring out the underleg here. But I don't want to overwork it. I do know this is going to change and it's going to be different once it dries. It's going to be much softer. So let me just take some of those bubbles out. I've been scrubbing my brush around. No problem. So now, what I have found is, because I've been impatient and I'm doing this quite quickly, sometimes here is lovely. Some of the white is is feathering into the wet background. Now I can prevent that by actually have waited a bit longer and waited for this to dry, but I quite like it. I noticed when I tried this the other day that happened, and I like the effect it created. So it kind of binds the dancer to the background. So these kind of things, which at first were a bit of a, it wasn't intentional, but in the end I'm going to keep it and use it. So this is how you learn as artists, and you find things that work for you, even though it probably wasn't designed to, you didn't design it to happen that way. And when you try and make it happen, it doesn't always. But you can see here how it's feathering, and I love that. I think it's a really nice effect. So adding some more strength. And again, with this, I probably need to let it dry fully, just to be able to go back in and to be able to add some more tones and lights, because it does dry back much lighter than you expect.
Well, another question from Chrissy. She wants to know what texture is the ground?
The ground is, they say it's very much like a knot surface. It depends on which brush you put it on with. If you put it on with a textured brush, you can create quite a textured background, which again is fun. I've put it on with quite a smooth brush. It suggests a couple of layers. I only actually did one layer on this because I knew that was absorbent enough for me. But if you do it nice and smooth, it's a bit like a knot texture, but what is happening is the texture of the canvas is coming through. So I'm working on the texture that feels like the canvas. So the grains of the canvas are showing through. But if you do it on another surface, which I'll show you at the end, it's a bit like a knot surface, quite smooth, but you can vary that. That's something you can vary depending on how you apply it. With the ground, it needs to go on, be prepared before, and you have 24 hours for it to cure and dry. And they do suggest a couple of layers. It depends on which surface you're putting it on to start with. On plastic, I do find it does need a couple of layers, and you just have to wait a couple of days, before you can paint on it. But on the canvas, it went on quite quickly, and like I said, I only used one ground. It worked very well. So when I'm doing this, I'm constantly thinking about here, it's nice and soft, but what happens here? I don't want to, light diffuses. It wouldn't stop here. So I've just got to think about where my light is going. I need to indicate it. I don't need to just gently. Okay, so now this is I think I just need to move on and just now much stronger, much whiter, and actually quite dry. Because again, I love that dry effect. I'm using the materials I have. I'm using the texture of the canvas. So using that texture to drag. Oops, that didn't work. I wasn't supposed to do that. So easy enough to lift off. And if once this is dried, and I usually only do it once it's dried, what I can do is I can go back with the black ground, and I can go over areas that I might have overworked or need to rework. So now, just some really strong highlights, just looking at the shape, just looking at, I don't want it too liney, I don't want just lines, so I'm altering the direction, and that's worked really nice, how that's feathering into the... I'll work on the two-tone last, I think. I just want to make sure I'm bringing out some of the stronger highlights. And you see that for me is quite harsh, so it's simple enough just to soften. And you don't have to go very far. You just need to just think about, actually that's one, it's very liney. What can I do to alter that? And it could be a few marks. So I need to work on the 2-2, build up. So like I said, I can't see these lights and darks in this image. What I'm having to do is think about it and work on it myself. You can see those marks there that you can make. They're lovely, making a nice soft image. So I think the face is a bit... Right, I don't want to work too much on to that. What I do need to do is to ground her. That's really working nice, I love that. Is to give her something to stand on. There we go. So that was pretty simple. I'm using white watercolour on a black watercolour ground, something that you don't think about. And that's it, one brush. You can keep things simple, you don't have to have all the tools. You know, and next time, once that's dried, I think, oh, wait a minute, that didn't work or this didn't work. Maybe I will, you know, move that leg or, you know, add highlights here but take them away from there. And that's all part of painting. So you can see by just putting a mount round how that really improves your work. So I use a mount usually at different stages through painting because it helps you stop. It helps you look at things that you need to do and look at things you don't need to do. Helps with overworking. So here's a couple of examples of work I've done. This is one of those cake plastic tubs which I painted on, and again I did a couple of grounds. What I have found is the tub's quite flexible and the ground isn't overly flexible, so it is cracking a little bit, but I will tell you I've had this on for years. This has been around for years. So maybe you have to think about the surface you put it on. A solid surface like a flat plastic, which is less flexible, or glass or china, it will work fine. But this is a plastic and it's worked fine, but it is a little bit more fragile because of the plastic being flexible. But I think that works effectively. And here, again, on a reused canvas that I had something on, just again showing the areas you leave out, how effective they can be. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it inspires you to go away and create and try things yourself. Join me again later in the week for some more live demonstrations.